Hello and welcome friends. In unit 3, that is advertising management, up till now we have discussed quite a few things which include an introduction on advertising and a discussion on the various steps involved in the advertising process. If you would recall, we were basically in the middle of discussion on this particular aspect, choosing the advertising message. And you would recall that we were basically talking about the execution aspect in the last session that we had, right? So we have talked about the first two steps, and as I said, we were in the middle of choosing the advertising message, and we had talked about the appeals and the execution styles, right? Now let us talk about a few more things in this particular step. Let us talk about the format elements. So what is the format of the advertising? That is what we actually mean by format element, right? So there are a number of aspects which are discussed within the format elements, which are taken up within the format elements. First one is the advertisement size. For example, if you are talking about a print ad, you can have a full page ad, you can also have a half page ad, you can have the standard size, which is 1/4 of a newspaper page, that is around A4, equal to an A4 sheet. So there can be different sizes which you can come up with. Likewise, if you are talking about a broadcast ad which is broadcasted to televisions and radio, you can have a 10-second ad, you can have a 15-second or a 25-30-second ad as well, right? So this is what we mean by the advertisement size. Now you have to be careful to use advertisement size to your advantage. I hope you remember that you have studied in consumer behavior and organizational behavior also, that something which is unique attracts more attention, right? So if by increasing the size of your ad, be it the television ad or be it a print ad or be it an outdoor ad, if you are able to attract the attention of the target audience, then you should certainly bring about this creative change, right? So the advertisement size has to be decided taking into consideration this aspect, the attention drawing power of that particular ad. If it is different from the normal size that the target audience sees, the target audience gets exposed to, then naturally it would be able to attract more attention, and that is what you want, right? So you can use size to attract the attention of the target audience. However, secondly, a greater size would mean that you'll have to spend more. Naturally, if you are coming up with a 40-second television infomercial, then naturally you'll have to spend more to show that particular ad on different TV channels. So you also have to take into account the amount of money that you would want to spend on these kind of campaigns. So depending on these two aspects, you decide the appropriate advertisement size for your campaign, right? The scope for creativity as far as advertisement size is concerned is far more in outdoor ads, wherein you can have different banners put up on the roadside. So you can be very creative with the size of the banners or the size of the hoardings or the shape of the hoardings also. So there also you have got a lot of scope for creativity, and you can experiment with different advertisement size depending on how successful they are in getting you the target audience attention. The second format element is color. So what kind of color combination are you going to use in your advertising campaign, right? Now please understand that this color combination should correspond to the color of your brand. So for example, if you look at the color combination which is prominently used by Airtel, you would find it is red, a shade of red. Why? Because this is the color which they have used in their brands also. So just by using a particular color, you can make customer remember you. You can remind the customer about your brand. For example, if you talk about Vodafone Idea, you would say, as far as Vodafone was concerned, pink was the prominent color. That was part of their brand name also, their logo also. So they use pink in a prominent fashion in all their advertising campaigns. If you talk about Idea, yellow was the color. So the color can also be used to aid customer retention, to aid customer recall of your brand, right? And whatever color you are using, then you should use it consistently across all the advertising messages that you are coming up with. Then the third element is the illustration. I'll be talking about it using an example. Illustration basically is any picture, any backdrop, the background that you are using, any picture, any kind of sketch, any cartoon, any photograph that you are using in your advertising message. So that is what we mean by illustration, and illustration is a very, very important aspect, specifically in a print ad. Then we have got the headline. Again, I'll be showing you as to what we mean by headline using an example, but there are different types of headline that you can come up with. Researchers have seen that these kind of headlines, they are able to attract the audience attention more. News, questions, narratives, 1, 2, 3 ways, and how, what, and whys. So I'll be discussing them again in detail, right? So this is another very important aspect as far as your advertising message is concerned. And then let us talk about the ad copy. So these three aspects have to be taken into account while designing your advertising message. We'll be talking about them in greater detail later in this very session. Then another thing that you have to be very, very sure about is to put your ad in congruent surroundings. What do we mean by congruent surroundings? I hope you remember congruent circles and congruent squares that you have read in your metric 10th class. What do we mean by congruent? See, your advertising message has a particular mood, it has a particular appeal. So the mood that is there in your advertising message should be similar to the mood of the surroundings. So for example, I'll give you an example of a television ad. Supposing we have seen the Pidilite Industries ad, Fevicol ad, which they come up on a regular basis. Now you know that they make use of humor as an emotion. The execution style is fantasy. Many a times we have read about all these aspects in the last session. So what happens is, if you are coming up with this ad and if you are showing this ad in the middle of some very serious kind of a program, let's say a news program which is talking about a stampede, Baghdad, and deaths of quite a few number of people there, naturally it is not going to make much of an impact, because the surroundings, the news channel within which, the news report within which you inserted your ad, the mood that it depicted was very, very different from the mood that your particular ad depicted. So this is not going to be very impactful. On the other hand, if you put up this kind of an ad, if you show this particular ad in the middle of some hilarious comic web series or in the middle of some comic program, let's say Tarak Mehta Ka Ulta Chashma, then it is going to have greater impact. So you have to be sure about the advertising mood, the advertising message, the mood, the appeal being congruent with the surroundings, right? So for example, there is a news article about iodine deficiency in children in India, and then you have placed your ad, your print ad there which talks about the salt that you are selling, the salt brand that you are selling, and how it takes care of the iodine deficiency. Now this message is going to have greater impact because the surroundings were congruent to the advertising message. So this is another thing that you have to take into consideration, right? Now let us discuss labeling. Now what do we mean by labeling? I hope you remember your various topics that you have read in marketing management in third semester. Therein you talked about the packaging and the labeling. Now what is the packaging? Packaging is the covering which you have given to your product, to your brand. Now what is labeling? Whatever has been mentioned on that particular covering, that is basically labeling. So for example, if you go and buy, let's say, a Dettol soap, the package is there and then there is something mentioned on the package. You see the brand name, you see various colors, you see the various other important pieces of information on that packaging. Now that all comprises of labeling. That all basically is, all of that is basically labeling. And labeling is also going to be a major aspect, specifically in the cases of impulse purchases. I hope you remember what impulse purchases are, about which you do not take a predetermined action, about which you have not thought a lot, and you buy on impulse. So a soap can be an impulse purchase, a chocolate can be an impulse purchase, and many a times the target audience is attracted by the label, whatever has been mentioned on the packaging. It could be the color, it could be the color combination, it could be the various aspects like plus 20% extra, 3 rupiah sasta, save 3 rupees, for example. So if all these things are mentioned on the package, that is, if they are all there as part of the labeling, then again you can attract the audience attention, specifically when they have turned up to purchase a particular product in the retail shop, right? So labeling also can be made use of to attract the audience attention. Now let us talk about this aspect which I had promised a few minutes ago, that I'll be discussing in more detail with an example. We'll be discussing now the illustration, the headline, and the copy. Now have a look at this particular ad. You know that this is a Nissan brand. So this is Micra cars from the Nissan stable. Now please have a look at the picture shown, the backdrop shown. What do we mean by the backdrop? The background that is shown. Here the Nissan Micra is being driven by probably Ranbir Kapoor, and in the background you see this huge building. Now this is an example of the illustration. The background as well as the foreground. This car is also part of the illustration. This background is also part of the illustration, right? So whatever pictures you are showing, whatever photographs you are showing, some sketches, cartoons, anything that you are showing, any photograph, any clip art, that is part of the illustration, right? Then let us talk about the copy. Now this part is the copy. Those days won't come back, nor will those huge parking spots, right? So this is the whole thing that has been mentioned here, is basically the ad copy, advertising copy, right? And what is the headline here? The headline is, those days won't come back, nor will those huge parking spots. And please also understand, this print ad should also identify your brand. So this logo has been mentioned here, Nissan, and this is the punchline of Nissan: shift the way you move, right? So this is what basically is included in your advertisement message, right? Now please understand one more thing. You need to understand that out of illustration we have seen these pictures here, out of the headline and the copy. Which one do you think is the most important? Can you recall any moment when you were looking at a newspaper print ad? What was the first thing that you looked at? Was it the photograph, the illustration, or was it the headline like this, or was it the copy? You would recall that the first thing that you look at is the illustration, the photograph. And then if you really find this illustration intriguing, if it is something that you find very interesting, then what you do is then you move towards the headline. And if you still find the headline also very, very interesting, you might go on to read the copy. So this is the sequence which is there. Basically, the audience first of all looks at the illustration, and then it looks at the headline, and then at the copy. So the first thing that you have to ensure is very, very effective is the illustration, right? So this is all about illustration and copy and the headline. I've told you the sequence is that the audience would first of all look at the illustration, then they will go through the headline, and then they will read the ad copy. So the ad copy is not going to help you attract attention. What is going to help you attract the audience attention is the illustration and the headline, right? Okay, before moving on to the next aspect, which would be the headlines, wherein we'll be discussing the different types of headlines, I would want you to find out what is the meaning of this particular ad. Those days won't come back. Just by looking at the headline, you would be able to understand what it means. Those days won't come back, and nor will those huge parking spots. And just by looking at this headline, you can also understand what is the positioning that has been adopted by Nissan Micra, what is their unique selling proposition, who all are its target audience. So you would be able to find all this out just by looking at the illustration and looking at the headline. So this is the task for you, and this is the assignment that you have to submit within 24 hours of this lecture getting released, right? Now let us talk in more detail about headline. So I said that headlines can be of different types, and we have talked about these 5 types which have been found to be more impactful in attracting the audience attention, right? So let us talk about them. Let me give you examples of these different types of headline. The first one, I have taken example of 1, 2, 3 ways. I hope you remember we have discussed just a little while ago. In headlines, this can be one way in which you can attract the audience attention. 1, 2, 3 ways means one way of losing weight, or you say 2 ways in which you can lose weight, 3 reasons why you should buy this particular brand, right? So this is what we mean by basically 1, 2, 3 kind of headline. And you see here 3 ways to lose weight after holidays, right? So here this particular ad is trying to promote a idea. It is not trying to sell a particular product. It is trying to sell this idea, and they have come up with this headline: 3 ways to lose weight after holidays. 5 ways to pass without studying. So this is an example of 1, 2, 3 ways kind of headlines. Then we have got my heart sings to see my family get a delicious blend of 8 vegetables, and they're talking about this ad again is of a product which is not being sold here in India. So they are showing this particular product, and see, they have ensured that the brand name is V8 is prominently displayed, and it is clearly visible to the audience, right? And now this is an example of a narrative. The mother, it looks from the picture that this is the mother and this is the son, and the mother is saying that her heart sings when when she sees that her family is having V8, because V8 basically has all the 8 different vegetables which provide nutrition to the human body. So this is an example of a narrative, right? So you can come up with this kind of a headline also. So narrative is when somebody is narrating his or her experience. So that is an example of narrative. Then we have got the third type, which is known as what, why and how. I hope you remember from the last slide. What, why and how. How can you be successful? How to crack CAT? How to get into a good school? Why you should join BBA at Degree College Pithoragarh. So these are basically examples of how, what, why kind of headlines, which again are found to be very, very impactful as far as their potential to attract audience attention is concerned. Now please read it here. How to write better headlines for your Facebook ads. Now this is again an ad by a particular marketer which actually helps those people who are trying to write headlines for their own ads to be displayed on the Facebook pages, right? So again, this is a service that is being provided by a particular marketer, and they have come up with this particular headline: how to write better headlines for your Facebook ads. So basically this is an example of how, what, why kind of headlines. Again, they've been found to be very, very impactful. Then you can also use this particular approach wherein you are posing a question to your audience. Like you see this particular ad here, Priyanka Chopra, does your toothpaste have salt and neem? Now this is the question that is being posed by Priyanka Chopra to the audience. And when you come up with these kind of questions as headlines in your advertising campaign, many a times you are able to generate significant amount of customer interest, target audience interest in your message. So the Colgate here is not claiming that they have salt and neem. They are only posing this question to the audience, and implied is the fact that Colgate has salt and neem. So they are not saying it directly, but it is implied. So Priyanka Chopra posing a question, and you see the prominently displayed brand name here, Colgate Salt Neem. So they're not saying, they're not coming up with any kind of a copy here. There is no copy here, you see. This is the headline. There is no copy, right? But they have been able to make their point, and what they have claimed is that their toothpaste has both salt and neem, which are good for the oral health, right? And this again now is, though a very controversial kind of a headline, but this is another way in which you can attract the audience attention. Have a look at what has been written here. You make use of some news items. So this particular news item has been made use of here. 8 million Kashmiris under siege. I am not I'm not claiming anything about the veracity of the ad which I am displaying here. What I am trying to tell you is that basically this is how you are able to draw the customer attention. Now the target audience attention. Now the target audience is, okay, 8 million Kashmiris under siege. What has happened? So protest Modi and human rights violation. So this is one way in which you can again attract the attention of the audience, right? So you can make use of some burning issue. You can make use of some prominent news item to get the message across to your target audience, right? So with this we wrap up the third step as far as the process of advertising is concerned. In the next session that we'll be moving over to the media decision. So thank you very much for your time.